Hello, Ron from Great Annexes again. Today I'm going to show you on the way to measure a wind skirt on a Caravan to ensure it lines up nicely with where the annex will sit. I want to show you some considerations and get you exposed to the kind of things you need to consider when measuring these up, because the wind skirt itself is generally the most customized item in the annex, and it's where we find the most amount of errors or troubles when delivering an annex system to a Caravan. So I want to break it down really simply for you to get you thinking on some real simple terms as to what a wind skirt is and what it does, and then from there we can build on from how to measure and get that measured correctly, so that it fits when you get it. So essentially what a wind skirt is doing, it's closing in all this area from the bottom of the wall to the ground, all through here. And of course, we're going to get draft and we're going to get bugs and we're going to get all sorts of things that are able to pass under the Caravan. So what we're trying to do with the wind skirt is close that hole up. Now, obviously the wind skirt also has to attach to the Caravan. So it's not a matter of just understanding what the gap is, it's understanding where on the wall we're going to attach the studs that will hold the skirt in place. And not that much unlike the annex wall, tracing the annex wall measurements, the wind skirt essentially does the same thing. You need to start, come across, down and around obstacles, up over wheel arches. You've got to miss obstacles on the wall that still need to get access, and then getting it back to the finish point. I cannot stress enough how different skirts can be in their physical size and shape. It is totally unique and custom to each Caravan, and therefore it's very unlikely, unless you've got two identical models, that a skirt would change from one van to another. Even on identical models, manufacturers can still change exact locations of hatch doors, exact locations of obstacles and power points and whatever. So therefore, even with identical models, you can still have trouble getting one skirt to fit to the other. So always ensure that you understand that you're measuring the skirt for this van. So in considering where skirts are measured to and from, you have to think in terms of where the annex rail will fit onto the Caravan. Now I've got a piece of annex rail here, and part of your job as a measurer is to start to visualize where these tracks are going to be on the van when you fit the annex, because this will govern the start and finish points of the skirt. So for instance, the ideal line on any skirt is 30 millimeters in from the edge, running a perfectly straight line to the bottom. Now in the perfect world where there's no obstacles, no windows, no hatches, no anything, a straight piece of sail track is fantastic and will go on easily. However, there's always, in a high number of cases, an obstacle that will get in your way, be it a window or whatnot. So you have to first determine where the sail track will fit, bearing in mind it must finish in line with 30 mil in off the edge of the fabric. So sometimes when so this one in particular, the obvious place for this one to fit will be here on the wall, okay? When I look up on that, we're probably 40 mil in, and a 10 mil variance isn't going to be a problem. We're clearing our obstacles here and we're running it down to the bottom. So this now tells me on this throat, that is the start point where you would measure your first dimension on the skirt, okay? So the skirt comes right up to the throat of this. This particular van is interesting because whilst we've got a relatively straightforward track happening on the front, the rear has obstacles, so this is a great demonstration. What we have on this one is 30 millimeters in is fine. We've actually got an obstacle at the top, which is the wire for this LED awning strip that's in the drum. So that needs to be considered and missed. But if we were to say that was fine, we come in 30 mil and we come down, we're starting to hit lockdown clips, But the biggest one is this hatch, okay? And if I get my track, you can see that's becoming a problem. So with this particular skirt, you have to consider, how am I going to deal with this hatch, and what is the hatch? Does the hatch need to be accessed when the annex walls are on? Because not forgetting, wherever you put this track, that's where the annex wall is going to come out from. So if we run over the top of this, and we'll have to cut this track here and then put another section on the door and finish it off at the bottom to keep that independent, but also the canvas of the wall is going to be there. So if this is a hatch that needs to be accessed regularly, then you're not really going to be able to run your wall over it. So on this particular instance, we might actually have to bring our track butt up the side of it, okay? Now you can see we're considerably in at the top, which has to be thought about. The fact that this van is a pop top means I can make this vinyl gusset custom, so I can get back over there. It won't be aesthetically the best result, but it'll work. Getting back to the windskirt, why we're saying this is you've got to consider where these tracks are actually going to fit. And depending on where the bottom of that track is going to end up is the location to where you measure to. So when we consider it starts here and comes around all the things, we have to consider where it finishes based in relation to where that throat is. And that's the simple way of looking at it. However, these tracks at many times have to miss obstacles. You may have to cut the track and kink it one way or the other, and that will kink out round a window and come down. Therefore, the skirt's got to travel further because we've got the throat of the track finishing outside the line. Not forgetting the track has to finish 30 mm at the top always. So these are the considerations to think about when it comes time to measuring the skirt. It's very important that you can visualise where these go to give you the point of completion or commencement. If we had 30 mm in from each side and that transferred perfectly down the wall, then of course the start and finish point would be exactly 60 mm less than the fabric width. So there's a good check measure there that if you've got perfect track alignment and you don't have any obstacles on front or back, if measured absolutely correctly, you should be 60 mm less than the actual fabric width, okay? This one here is actually quite varied off the original position. It's got a massive variance. So when I add these figures up, it's going to be substantially shorter. If that's the case, and it's on the case on purpose, when you put your order in, you need just to indicate to us that this skirt measurement, if it's not 60 mm less than the overall fabric measurement, anything variation from that, you just need to sign off to say, yep, look, there are obstacles, I'm happy with these measurements, because we can't tell whether you have to miss things. We can't see the van, obviously. So just bear in mind, if you're not perfectly lining up two straight tracks that are a perfect fit, as we'd say, an ideal fit, just let us know that you've had to alter your length measurement on your skirt so that we can know that you haven't made a measure error. Okay, so having now determined where those tracks are going to start and finish and be located on the van, we can begin our process of measuring. So what I need to explain is that you'll find on our measure key or our measure sheet, there's a series of letters. The letters that relate to the windskirt are the G, H, I, J, K, L, M, and N measurements. In brief, the G to K measurements all relate to the horizontal measurements of the windskirt, and the L, M, and N measurements relate to the heights and depths measurements. So we always start measuring a skirt by, as we look at the van, the left hand or the front side of the Caravan is the start point. On this particular skirt, from that start point from the saddle track, it's going to come into G. G is going to finish at the door. H is the horizontal measurement across the door. Be it down the bottom, it's still a horizontal measurement. We change direction, we come up to your next horizontal measurement. That then is a horizontal measurement, which is I. And this particular one, it's special again, very special van, this one. Probably a good way to demonstrate the complexities a skirt can deliver, because on this, while traditionally a skirt would come past, come down square and continue on this skirt we've got these considerations. So what we'll have to do is come in here, bring it down on an angle to miss all that, and bring it around, which we'll need to measure out. Understand too, depending on the design of the windskirt, you may not use every field and have a value for every field. It's quite okay sometimes to only use 4 of the 5 fields if that's what the horizontal changes dictate. On some vans you'll use all 5, on some vans you'll only use 3 horizontal measurements depending on what the trace looks like. So bear that in mind. Okay, so when we look at G, we know the start point was in line with our sail track, and we'll measure straight into the side of the door, and that's where the end of that distance will be. This particular one is 660 mil. That gets me to here. Well, of course, it's still got to travel across the door. An L measurement will be used here to come and tell me how far down I've got to come. But essentially then the H measurement, which is the next horizontal measurement, comes across the door. Now with this one, it hard measures 595 mil, but my advice to you is to always add 5 mil when you're around your doors, just so it's not that tight where when it comes time to fit it, you might struggle to get it to fit nicely. So always add 5 mil around these obstacles. So that measures hard 595. I would note it as 600 to give you some breathing room. Okay, we're going to have another measurement now that'll come up and give me back to my height, but essentially the next horizontal is from the extra side of this door. We're going to come across to the top of this angle here, because we are going to cut this angle down. We've got to visualize this material, and all you're doing is just starting to say, where can it actually run? Where can the material travel without getting in the way of anything? So I can see this is going to come along underneath this picnic table to about this point here, where then we're going to cut down on an angle. So at that point there, it's around 1635 where the skirt will finish and begin its trajectory down. What has to be thought about in this particular instance is that 1635 is, if we went square down off that, that would be technically where the next measurement would start. So we actually have to do a transfer measurement to this point. So when you're sketching out your windskirt, you'd need to draw this one out and show me the measurement. And using the door as the constant position, we'll come over here and go, yep, that's 1635 at the top, but where's it going to be when it gets to here? How do we know where it's going to finish? Well, of course, we use the door as the constant. So we go back to the door here and we measure across to the finish point. And I can see that's going to be about 1870. So all of a sudden now I can plot the two measurements at 1635 and 1870 to give me the distance I need to know to cut that angle. Here, so the last horizontal measurement's back out to where the sail track's going to fit. On this particular one, we decided to leave it butt up against the hatch. So we would now go through from that last point to the hatch, and that will be roughly 940 mil on that last measurement. So what we've just done there is travelled the skirt across the van, okay? Looking at all the horizontal measurements required to get us from the start to the finish. Okay, so we've now done the length measurements. We're now going to do the height measurement. Now, almost all skirts from the start point and the finish point are on the same height. So generally a good rule of thumb is when you measure the height of a skirt, make sure your van's level, of course. We generally always ensure that we're at least 30 mil above the height of the moulding. Okay, so to the top of the moulding here is 440 mil. I would ensure that I'd probably measure this 470 mil, just to ensure we're well and truly up on the wall. There's plenty of room for the stud to connect. But that 470 mil on the finish of the skirt is likely to be the same, because most all caravans will start and finish on the same height. We call that the M measurement, or what I call the median line, or the M line. M line, usually for start and finish of the skirt is the same height. So when we have that M line, which on this one is 30 mil above the top of the mold, right? We need to know, once that G measurement comes in, how far down we have to go to get around this door in relation to that M line. So like I said, I know it's 30 mil higher than the top of the mold. Okay, so that will put us just on the top of that reflector. So basically I will now measure L measurement. L measurement's coming off the M line, coming down around the door. So this is where it shows me where to cut the skirt, around the door. So we start from the bottom of the door and we measure up to that M line plus 5 mil. So hard measures 180 mil, but we'll plus 5 so it's not so tight. So L will be 185 mil on this particular van. So the two measurements we covered so far is the M and the L. The N measurement tells me how high above the wheel arch we need to be. So obviously I've got no real reference to where the M line is. When we're doing the door, we have a real direct reference to where the M line is actually happening, so we can measure to it. But of course, when we come over the wheels, there's no real definitive place to trace that M line to us. So what we're doing to avoid confusion is N actually measures from the ground to the point where the skirt will come to. So this skirt will actually come all the way up to underneath this picnic table, and this one particularly is 780 mil. So N measurement is a full measurement from the ground to the top of the skirt. Some considerations around N measurement happens. There's a lot of these wheel spats that are there's some slimline spats, there's some really chunky wide spats. And when it comes time to measuring your annex, that can give us some problems with the skirt, particularly the chunky ones. Because now the material has more travel to have to do to get around that and then back up onto the wall. So the hint or tip around measuring N measurement, this one we're kind of governed by this table. We can't go higher, any higher, because this table stops us. Let's assume that wasn't there and we've got more room. I'd typically like to come a bit further up than what we can on this one, just to ensure that the material's got plenty of room to negotiate this protrusion of the wheel spat. And it's something just to think about when you're measuring. So ensure that if you've got fat wheel spats, give yourself a higher finish point to give the material time to relax back into position. If we go too close, it'll be still under pressure turning in the corner, and then we're trying to stud it, and it won't fit very well. If thought about correctly, go back to basics and think about the fact that I need to get a piece of material just to close these gaps up, and I've got to miss obstacles on the wall at the same time. And if you consider everything there and try and visualize where everything will sit, sail tracks, the studs for the skirt, you can visualize all that. It'll make your measure potential a lot higher for success and should give you less problems when you go to install it. No two vans are the same. Every windscreen is custom, so just think about the practicality of it. And if you need help, we're here to help. Just send us a photo, send us an image around of your van, and we can give you the plotting track that we'd take in making your skirt, and then you can go and hard measure those out. As I mentioned, all windskirts are custom designed and unique to every Caravan. So I thought I'd come and grab this Caravan to further highlight the basic elements to what a skirt does and what it is, and then how you transfer that into measuring it. So here we have a totally different style Caravan, and it is a little less complicated as far as obstacles and devices to miss. So again, the bare reason the skirt exists is to close up all this gap under the van. Now this particular one, and a lot of Caravans are doing now, running checker plate on this last panel here. And what I like to do to keep a Caravan annex looking neat is I like to run the sail tracks to the point in which it changes, so that the white sail track finishes on the white skin. Therefore the start of our skirt, or the height of our skirt, the M line, the median line, which is normally, again to recap, normally starts and finishes at the same place on both ends of the van. And this one's really easy to see because you can pretty much pick up the M line, which is the joint between these two panels, to give you that distance. So when we look at tracing this particular windskirt, we will be starting over here, thinking in terms of visualizing where these tracks are going to go. This one in particular has an obstacle of a window. So this 30 millimeters in on the fabric is about here on the window. Well, of course, if we put a track there, our window won't open, so that's not practical. So what we're going to have to do with this one is butt the track up against the window, but we're actually going to have to notch the track out and bend it back up to that 30 mil in point. So this particular sail track will be coming out on an angle initially from the 30 mil in point, and then straight down to the bottom of the wall. Okay, and that's not uncommon. Windows on this front track are very common obstacles, so you're going to have to go up beside them and kick your track back in. But this is giving us our start point. So now we see where that throat is. There's our start point. Now knowing where that is, we can start to measure. We have a perfectly straight sail track happening in this area, and it's easy to get the end point there. So end point here is 30 millimeters in. When you have these non-obstacle ones, use the center of your bracket, because the center of this top bracket and the center of this bottom bracket are the same place on the Caravan. So you can measure from the center of this bracket in to the 30 mil in mark and simply transfer that measurement down to the bottom using the bottom bracket, and there's your actual mark for your finish point. And this is really a straightforward skirt. We're going to come along to the door. We're coming down around the door, and we're going to be able to run one straight line through to the back using that checker plate as a line. So on this particular skirt, there's only 3 horizontal measurements. There's G into the door. It's going to change direction, so that finishes that measurement. H is going to occur on the door. And I is actually going to travel all the way to the end of the skirt, finished. GHI only on this one. As said earlier, M measurement to keep the sail tracks looking neat and finishing on white. Our M measurement can actually be that joint. So on this particular one, the M measurement is 790 mil. So that's great. We now know how wide the annex is. We now know how high it is. Okay. Now we just need to know how far down we need to come on L measurement. L measurement is the cutout of the door from the M line down, right? So again, we're going to measure up to the M line, which is 260 millimeters, and we're going to add 5 mil just to give us some clearance. So L would be measured 265 mil. Cross, 265 mil down. I know it's going to be 265 mil back up again, and then that can run through to finish off the skirt. There's actually no end measurement on this skirt because M is maintaining a height all the way through, which incorporates the wheel arch. So there is no change of height to get M sorted out on this van. So N for Nelly is not required. Almost a lot of Caravans have steps under the door, and we need to think about those steps so we can cut access slits into the windskirt. So depending on which horizontal measurement the door is, on this particular one it's H measurement, we need to now understand where the arms of the steps are in relation to H so that we can plot some cuts at that point. So the simple way to do that is to start at the edge of your door, and we're basically looking for this dimension as it falls on the tape, meaning that when I measure this over from the corner point of the skirt, I can see that it travels about, and you're going to be on the angle so you won't see this, but that travels about 60 millimeters to this start of this arm. So 60 millimeters in, the arm starts, and it finishes at about 80 millimeters. Give yourself 5mm extra room here too, just to give yourself some clearance. So on the measurement key, you'll see a long H measurement in this particular case. It'll say from and to, from and to. So from 60 to 80 is where the arm exists. The second from and to field talks about the next arm. So from the inside to the outside. So when we look at this, it's from 550 to 570. And that's the second from and to field sorted out. That just tells me where it is. And then you'll see the deep field, and the deep field purely relates to how far down from the door until we clear that arm. And you'll see here, it's about 290mm down to clear. So I'd always chuck a little bit extra in there. So I'd say that was 300mm down. And that's going to plot the depth. We have to make that slit. So from and to purely talks about from the start point of the door, from the 60mm mark to the 80mm mark, from the 550 to the 570mm mark is where the arms exist. And how deep the slit has to be is measured so that we clear this arm, which was 300mm in this case. And that's how you measure the doorstep. And what will happen is when we make the skirt, it'll come in, it'll come down, and then the skirt will actually have 2 cuts in it, therefore creating a little flap partition in that same measurement. And that's going to feed up behind the step, and 2 press studs are going to hold it there. And there's going to be another 2 press studs on the other side, and then we'll have nice little neat cuts around those arms to keep it all nice and sealed for you.